like a bell cut.
Hello and welcome back to the channel where once again it's time for another Sega Saturn review, with today's game being a compilation of two arcade games. I'm talking about Bobble featuring Rainbow Islands, which originally saw release in September of 1996 over in North America before coming out over here in the PAL region in November. It did not get a Japanese release. Now, Bobble originally saw release in 1986 in the arcades, and Rainbow Island came out a year later in 1987, and both of these games actually got released on the Sega Master System, which was the first console that I ever had. But alas, I was never lucky enough to have either of these games on my Master System back then. Like always, I'll be talking about what they look like on the Saturn, what they sound like, what they play like, their content and lifespan, whether they're still worth playing today, and whether they can make our Sega Saturn top 10. So once the main menu arrives, you will see you've got a choice of Bobble, a choice of Rainbow Islands, and also a choice of Rainbow Islands Enhanced, which is a visual update of the Rainbow Islands game. It does play the same though, and it does sound the same as the original version. As always, I'm going to talk about visuals first, and it's hard enough talking about Saturn games nowadays, but when we're talking about two games that were 10 years old at the time that they got released on the Saturn, it's even harder because there isn't really a whole lot to see here. Bobble is a pretty basic looking game. Rainbow Island is slightly more impressive. There's certainly a more varied use of colour in that game, so it's good in that regard. Both of the games have got this cutesy childlike charm to them though, so that may well appeal to some people. In terms of what you actually think of the visuals though, I think it's really going to depend on whether you played these games originally in the arcade, or perhaps even had some of the first home conversions, maybe on the Amstrad, the Spectrum or the Commodore, as to what you feel and your nostalgia for the games. For me, I didn't play them in the arcade. I was too young when these games came out, and when they came out on the Master System, I never had them. I never played them, so I don't really have any nostalgia for these games visually whatsoever. They are basic, they are functional, and they do their job, but by the time they came out on the Saturn, they were very dated looking games. Now moving on to the sound effects and music, and again it's a difficult topic to talk about because everything that is here is perfectly fine. All the sound effects fit the games very well, both for Bobble and Rainbow Islands, but the downside is you're going to hear the same sound effects over and over and over again, and because there's quite a lot of levels to go through, of course it gets repetitive. And in terms of music, Bobble simply has one primary tune that plays throughout the whole entire game. Yes, it does speed up in tempo when you start to run out of time, but that is it. Rainbow Islands has a little bit more variety because it has one primary tune, but it also has a boss theme as well. So there's two tracks there, but the fact is that gets repetitive as well. And even though I like the Bobble theme, the prospect of hearing it for 100 levels continually is daunting, and there is no denying that in terms of sound effects and music, both of these games get quite repetitive. But what I will do is, like always, give you examples of the tunes so you can experience them for yourselves. Now moving on to the gameplay next, and in terms of Bobble, it's quite simplistic. You move your character, you shoot bubbles at the enemies, trying to capture them inside, and then destroy the bubbles to defeat the enemies, and then they'll drop items which you can collect and give you points. You can ride special items that pop out of bubbles, which can then defeat enemies also, and you can collect letters on the stages. If you collect all the letters, you will then move ahead to the next level and gain an extra life. That is pretty much it. I'm by no means an expert at either of these games. They are simplistic arcade games after all, and they are very repetitive to play. In terms of the actual point of Bobble, you need to get to the end of the 100th level to rescue your loved ones. That really is it. In terms of Rainbow Island's gameplay, there is a little bit more to it than Bobble because you fire rainbows on this game, and they can be used as platforms to help you climb up the stages, but they're also used as your attack to defeat enemies too. You've got a jump button as well, and you can collect a variety of power-ups on this game, such as the ability to fly or shoot multiple rainbows together, making it a little bit easier. Once you get to the end of every round, you will face a boss on this game as well. In terms of difficulty, both games are quite challenging, and they get harder the further you get through them. There is no denying that, and I'm not going to lie, I've not completed either of these games, and that is simply down to the fact they are too repetitive to play. And when you combine it with the fact that they're quite repetitive to look at and repetitive as well in terms of sound and music, it is quite a struggle to put yourself through these games nowadays. So moving on to content and lifespan next, and Bobble will give you 100 levels of action to play through, whereas Rainbow Islands will give you around about 40 levels as well. Take into account you've also got the enhanced version of Rainbow Islands as well, so there's actually quite a lot to play through here. The massive downside for me personally is the fact that you cannot save any data. If you want to play through these games, you've got to start at the beginning and play through them right to the end in one go, and I simply haven't got the patience for that, and that would really be whether this game appeals to you or not in the long term, whether you don't get bored from the repetitive nature and the repetitive music. For me, I simply haven't got it in me to play through 100 levels of Bobble or 40 levels of Rainbow Islands. Now, as always, that leaves us with our two final questions. Is Bobble featuring Rainbow Islands still worth playing today now, and can it make our Saturn top 10? Well, I'll get straight to the point and tell you it's nowhere near my Saturn top 10, and that's simply because there's not enough here. It gets very repetitive very quickly. We've got repetitive gameplay, repetitive music, repetitive sound effects, and all in all, it just simply doesn't do enough to warrant playing in this day and age. You may get a nostalgia kick from it for a few minutes or maybe even a few levels if you played these games in the arcades, or perhaps if you had the first lot of conversions of these on perhaps the Commodore or the Amstrad or the Spectrum. But apart from that, I don't really think either of these games really offer anything in this day and age. I find it very hard to go back to 1980s arcade games now and play them for any substantial length of time. But of course, these are just my thoughts and my thoughts alone. If yours differ or if you agree with me, let me know with a comment down below like always. And as always, I'll be back in the near future with another video. Goodbye for now.